Hey beautiful, have you considered subscribing to our channel? Help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers.
The shuttle descended through Earth's upper atmosphere in a controlled glide, its hull trembling as it sliced through the thick, oxygen-rich air. Inside, a group of alien students from the Galactic University shifted uncomfortably in their restraints, watching the blue-green planet swell beneath them. "I still can't believe we're going down there," murmured Kareth, his frilled head crest twitching with nervous energy. The Lorethi's chlorophyll-rich skin shimmered faintly under the cabin lights. "A true death world. Who volunteers for that?" "You did," replied Ziln, the CH-car from the suboceanic moons of Helix Dry. Her three-fingered hands were clenched in her lap. "We all did. Elective course in xenobiology. Field immersion. The humans offered limited access, first time in 20 cycles." Karetha's crest flattened. "I assumed the term, death world, was hyperbole." "Then you weren't paying attention in lecture," said Tyrex, who had remained silent until now. The enormous Skarnan barely fit in his seat. His crystalline body pulsed with quiet resonance. "Earth's fauna alone accounts for more lethal species than the rest of the galaxy combined. That's before you consider the humans." "The humans," Kareth repeated with a touch of reverence and dread. From the front of the cabin, their supervising scholar, Professor Idrin Vel, cleared his throat. "Composure, students. The humans have agreed to host this observational visit under strict supervision. Do not deviate from assigned zones. Do not provoke. And above all," he paused, letting his gaze settle on each of them, "do not assume you understand Earth, or its inhabitants. This is a world that eats its own." The shuttle landed without ceremony atop a high-altitude research platform in the Andean range. The station was a compact fusion of human practicality and alien modularity, braced against wind and seismic tremors, a place that dared the elements to try harder. As the boarding ramp hissed open, the cold bit like a predator. Even through thermally regulated suits, the alien students recoiled. A human stood at the base of the ramp, arms folded, expression unreadable behind her dark-tinted visor. She wore no exoarmor, no protective gear, just a thick coat, scarred boots, and the bearing of someone who had walked through too many fires to count. "I'm Dr. Elena Ramirez," she said crisply. "Welcome to Earth. You're late." "We apologize," Professor Vel said quickly. "Atmospheric turbulence." "That is the atmosphere," Ramirez interrupted. "Come on. Inside before it turns." The interior of the station was warmer but no more comforting. The human design ethos was evident in every steel beam, every wire, every backup system built in duplicate. Redundancy, caution, resilience, nothing was taken for granted here. Screens displayed constant updates, seismic activity, storm patterns, UV index, and alerts for over 50 distinct biohazards. Ramirez led them to a briefing room lined with maps, data clusters, and pinned photos of landscapes that looked almost alien in their own right. Deserts of glass, jungles thick enough to hide armies, volcanoes that bled glowing rock like open wounds. "Let's get this straight," she began, tossing a data pad onto the table. "You're here to observe. You don't touch. You don't test. You don't wander. Earth is classified Deathworld Class 5 for good reason." Kareth blinked. "There are classifications above this?" "Yes. None inhabited. This is the only world where a native species reached Type 1 civilization status without external assistance." Tyrex leaned forward slightly. "You mean humans?" "I mean us," Ramirez confirmed, her tone level. "Born in fire, bred in famine, raised by war. We've tamed continents and still lose entire towns to flooding. We're not the apex predator here. We're just the ones who learned to cheat." A long silence followed. "But you're peaceful now," said Ziln hesitantly. "Mostly." Ramirez's eyes flicked toward her. "Is that what they told you?" She tapped the console behind her and the screen lit up with footage. Fires consuming forests at terrifying speed. Tornadoes tearing through cities. Floods that rose higher than buildings. Then humans, wading through wreckage, pulling survivors from rubble, clinging to one another in defiance of the storm. "We adapt. We rebuild. But we don't forget what this world is," she said. "Neither should you." Professor Vel stepped in smoothly, sensing the weight of the moment. "Fascinating. May we begin the initial scans?" Ramirez nodded. "Knock yourselves out. Just don't go outside without me." As the group dispersed, murmuring and observing, Kareth lingered near the viewport. He stared out at the jagged mountains stretching into the clouds like stone fangs. The sky was too bright. The air too volatile. And yet, somehow, this place thrived. Later that day, the students gathered in the observation dome. They were quiet, subdued, the magnitude of the planet beginning to settle over them like pressure at depth. "I can't stop thinking about it," Ziln said. "The trees. They release oxygen at levels that would corrode most metals back home. And the humans just breathe it. Their biology is impossibly inefficient," Kareth muttered. "And somehow effective. Their organs overclock to maintain body heat. Their muscles tear and rebuild stronger after use. They suffer injury constantly, and yet heal without regenerative vats. They don't have neurostatic comm centers either," Tyrex said. "They process stress through behavior, movement, art, music, even violence." "Savage," said Kareth. "Survivors," corrected Tyrex. Ramirez entered silently behind them. She handed each of them a small device. "Translational biosensors. If anything on this planet starts trying to eat you, this will alert you 2 seconds before it's too late." 2 seconds. Zone squeaked. "Plenty of time. If you're human." There was something wry in her smile and something steel underneath it. She turned back toward the corridor. "Prep for field exposure begins tomorrow. We're going to a controlled zone in the southern Amazon. Bring your instincts. Leave your assumptions." She paused at the threshold and looked back once. "I know what you're thinking," she said. "That this place doesn't make sense. That we shouldn't exist. That nothing this hostile should produce a sentient species." She walked back in slower this time. "But it's because of this world. Every moment here teaches us that life isn't owed. Earned. We didn't conquer Earth. We bargained with it. We learned to see through its lies, to grow teeth beneath our smiles. To carry the storm inside us." Kareth met her gaze. "Is that why they call it a death world?" Ramirez considered the question. "No," she said at last. "They call it a death world because everything here, us included, had to learn how to kill just to survive." The room fell silent again, the only sound the faint hum of life support systems filtering Earth's unruly air into something their lungs could tolerate. Outside, the clouds rolled in over the peaks like a living thing. Inside, the students began to realize, the real lesson hadn't started yet. 3 days had passed since the jungle. Kareth hadn't spoken more than a few words since returning to the station. His chlorophyll-rich skin had dulled, no longer shimmering but dry and brittle around the edges. He sat near the window most days, eyes locked on the storm clouds roiling along the distant peaks, as if they held a cipher he was desperate to decode. Ziln moved slower, but she moved. Her wound had healed, though the trauma lingered deeper. She no longer flinched at small noises, but her gaze lingered longer on exits, on weapons, on shadows. She had started sketching the things she'd seen in the jungle: creatures, plants, strange patterns in the bark of trees. Not for art but for memory. Proof. Tyrex alone had emerged more curious than shaken. The Skarnan was built to withstand extremes, and Earth had fascinated him, not frightened him. He had started spending more time with the human engineers, quietly but intently, watching how they repaired the station after each seismic tremor, how they calibrated systems to keep chaos at bay. Professor Vel, ever meticulous, had filed daily reports back to the university. Each message became progressively more formal, less enthused. His tone had shifted from academic awe to diplomatic caution. And Ramirez? She watched them all. Every shift in posture, every pause between breaths. She wasn't unkind, but she didn't coddle either. Earth had taught her not to waste time on comfort. "This planet doesn't just try to kill you," she said one evening as the group gathered for a scheduled debrief. "It asks a question. Every day. Same one." She looked around the room. "Do you deserve to be here?" Kareth met her eyes for the first time in hours. "And what happens if the answer is no?" Ramirez offered a tight smile. "Then you disappear. Quietly, violently, or both." The silence that followed was thick. Professor Vel cleared his throat, stepping forward with a hologram. "In light of the recent exposure, the university has suggested truncating the mission. A final location was offered by the host delegation. One more excursion. Optional, of course." Tyrex tilted his head. "Where?" Ramirez answered. "Chernobyl." Ziln straightened. "The site of a nuclear disaster." "Exactly," Professor Vel nodded. "Decades ago. Human history is rich with examples of self-inflicted catastrophe. Studying their aftermath offers insight into socio-cultural resilience." Kareth stood abruptly. "You want us to walk into a graveyard?" "It's a sanctuary now," Ramirez said. "Ironically, nature reclaimed it. No humans live there permanently. And yet life thrives, mutated, yes, but stubbornly alive. Your species poisoned the land, Kareth said, voice low. And then simply moved on? Ramirez walked to the viewport, her arms crossed. No. We carried the guilt. We studied it. We mourned. And then, like everything else, we endured it. They left 2 days later. The trip to Chernobyl was smooth, the shuttle quieter than the last. The students spoke little, each lost in separate lines of thought. As the station disappeared behind them, a strange sense of absence filled the cabin, like they were leaving not just a place, but an understanding of safety they had only just begun to recognize. Chernobyl lay under a gray sky, blanketed in stillness. Towering trees cracked through old roads. Vines coiled around rusted playgrounds and toppled monuments. Whole buildings leaned into the earth, bowed by time and abandonment. Radiation levels are tolerable with shielding, Professor Vell reported. But remain alert. Mutation zones are erratic. The city felt like a memory wearing a body. Decay had teeth here, but so did regrowth. Foxes darted between crumbling structures. Birds sang from empty windowsills. The forest was claiming everything, and it did not ask permission. Kareth paused beside a collapsed mural, a painting of a smiling child flaking away in patches. They built lives here, he said softly. Ramirez nodded. And they lost them. Not because of war. Not because of the planet. But because of a mistake. A human one. Ziln crouched by a flower growing through a crack in the concrete. Its petals shimmered faintly under her scanner. This species shouldn't exist in this soil. And yet it does, Ramirez said. Mutation isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's survival wearing a new face. Tyrex approached a rusted statue and placed a hand on it. You call this place haunted. But it feels sacred. Ramirez looked toward the skeletal remains of a reactor tower in the distance. Because here we see the truth. We made something we couldn't control. It broke. We paid for it. And the world kept spinning anyway. That night they camped in one of the old dormitories, reinforced, shielded, and eerily intact. Rain tapped the broken windows. Lightning traced the outline of a dying city in silhouette. As they sat in silence, Kareth finally spoke. I came here believing your species survived because of luck. Evolutionary recklessness. That somehow you blundered your way through extinction events. He looked around the room. Not just at Ramirez but at his fellow students. At the cracked walls and flickering emergency lights. At the quiet sound of wind curling through empty hallways. I was wrong. No one interrupted him. You didn't survive in spite of Earth. You survived because of it. You learned to absorb pain, to digest it, to grow from it. Not just physically but emotionally. Psychologically. You endured failure. You embraced it. And then you stood back up. He turned to Ramirez. You're not the apex predators because you kill best. You're the apex because you endure hardest. She gave no response. She didn't need to. But the look she gave him then, quiet, proud, and impossibly tired, carried centuries in its silence. Outside, thunder cracked. And beneath it, something howled. Not animal. Not weather. Human. A scream. Ramirez was up instantly, rifle in hand. Stay here. Someone's out there, Tyrex said, already moving. That wasn't a storm. Ramirez hesitated, then nodded once. With me. Stay close. They moved through the ruins like ghosts, guided only by faint echoes and instinct. A collapsed tower lay broken in the trees. Near its base, movement. A human figure. Dirty, emaciated. Skin blotched with exposure. Eyes wild. A scavenger, Ramirez muttered. Shouldn't be this deep. Not alone. The man saw them and bolted. Wait. Ziln called, stepping forward. Too late. He stumbled into a broken section of earth. A sinkhole opened beneath him. A soft, terrible crunch echoed upward. They reached him moments later. The fall hadn't killed him. But the metal spike through his side had. Ramirez dropped to her knees. Hold on. I've got you. The man looked at her, eyes glazed. Shouldn't we come back, he rasped. Knew better. Thought I could. His voice failed. Then, you're still here. Ramirez leaned closer. We are. He nodded once, almost a smile. Good. And then he was gone. No drama. No last breath. Just gone. They buried him in silence. Even Professor Vell didn't speak. Back at the dormitory, the rain had stopped. Kareth sat by the window again, staring into the quiet dark. This world has no room for weakness. Ramirez shook her head. No. This world teaches you that weakness is temporary. Survival isn't about strength. It's about will. The air in the southern Amazon was dense, humid, and alive with unseen movement. Every breath tasted like damp leaves and distant thunder. Even through multilayered biosuits, the alien students felt the pressure of the jungle as a sentient presence, watching, waiting, patient. "This environment is aggressive," Ziln whispered, staring into the canopy. "It emits pheromones. The plants compete chemically. Even the flora is in conflict." Kareth scanned the area, the light-sensitive plates along his arms flaring in agitation. "There are over 2,000 known species of insect here. More than half of them venomous. This planet doesn't regulate life. It unleashes it." Dr. Ramirez, dressed in simple cargo gear and a loosely slung pulse rifle, moved ahead with a steady gait. She didn't look back. "Keep up. And keep quiet. Everything here hunts by sound." Professor Vell trailed just behind, his translucent skin glistening with the sweat equivalent of his species. He offered nervous commentary through the group's shared comms. "This biome is the densest biological concentration on Earth. Be respectful and remain within 5 meters of the guide. The humans have graciously secured this corridor." "What does secure mean here exactly?" Tyrex asked. His large, crystal-forged frame stepped lightly for its size, but even he felt dwarfed beneath the tangled canopy. "It means the locals only check for jaguar activity once a week," Ramirez called over her shoulder. "It's Thursday. We're fine." Karetha's breathing spiked. They passed beneath a tree whose trunk pulsed with bioluminescent fungus. 1,000 tiny eyes blinked open from the bark, only to disappear when the group's steps triggered motion. Something skittered across the undergrowth with a sound like breaking glass. "Why would your species remain here?" Ziln asked, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. "Why not leave this place behind once you develop spaceflight?" Ramirez paused and looked back. "Because we didn't survive Earth by abandoning hard places. We survived by understanding them. Conquering them never lasts. But knowing how they think, that's how you endure." She knelt suddenly, holding a closed fist up. Everyone froze. A low hum moved across the ground like a ripple. "Fire ants," she said after a moment. "Stay still. They'll pass." Tyrex activated a spectral scan and stared. "There are millions of them. Marching in columns. Predatory coordination. They consume entire animal bodies in hours." "Minutes," Ramirez corrected. "You're lucky this isn't a swarm day." They waited. The ants passed. That was the moment it began to sink in. Earth's danger wasn't about large predators or massive threats. It was the density of adversity. Every inch of terrain, every breath, every heartbeat was a negotiation. By midday the heat had reached saturation. Kareth, despite internal cooling membranes, began to falter. His vision flickered, his steps slowed. Ziln moved to assist, her own legs wobbling under the foreign gravity. "You need to hydrate," Ramirez ordered, tossing a sealed packet from her belt. "Electrolytes. Your suits aren't enough out here." "We accounted for radiation and toxins," Kareth panted. "But we didn't anticipate," he trailed off, unable to articulate the sheer pressure of being alive on this planet. Ramirez crouched beside him and adjusted a dial on his collar. "That's your problem. You thought danger comes in waves. But on Earth, it's the ocean." A shriek split the air above them. Something swooped, too fast to see clearly, and collided with the outer edge of their formation. A scream echoed through the trees. When the group turned, Ziln was on the ground, her suit punctured near the shoulder. Blood, not hers, stained the foliage in splatters. A bird-like creature, wings of skin and claws like bone needles, lay twitching beside her. Professor Vell rushed over with a medical drone, but Ramirez was already there. She grabbed a cauterization kit from her pack and applied it with clinical force. Ziln whimpered, eyes wide. "You're lucky," Ramirez said, sealing the wound. "Most visitors don't make it to their first bloodletting." "That thing just dove out of the trees," Ziln stammered. "They're territorial. You probably looked like prey. I'm 3 meters tall. Size doesn't matter here. Attitude does." They camped under a netted enclosure that night. Security pulses flashed every 30 seconds to ward off insects and nocturnal carnivores. The students clustered close, subdued. Tyrex stared at the flickering hologram of the day's data collection. Their planet isn't just hostile. It's adaptive. Every time you push back, it pushes harder. Ramirez sat a short distance away, sharpening a field knife out of reflex. "You're starting to get it." Kareth looked up, his face pale and drawn. "How did your species survive this for millennia? Before technology. Before any defense." Ramirez didn't smile. She didn't need to. The answer was burned into the lines around her eyes. We didn't have to be the strongest. Or the fastest. We just had to be the ones who refused to die. In the silence that followed, distant howls rose in the jungle. Not one but many. Communal. Echoing. Predators communicating across the canopy. Organizing. Kareth shuddered. The following morning brought clear skies and renewed caution. Ziln's wound had sealed, but she moved slower. Kareth showed early signs of respiratory strain, even with filtered air. Ramirez adjusted the route accordingly. They were halfway through an elevation climb when Kareth stumbled. He coughed violently, then ripped off his helmet, gasping. His eyes widened, and immediately he dropped to his knees, clutching at his throat. Stupid. Ramirez snapped, lunging to him with a rebreather. Don't ever remove gear without confirmation. Kareth wheezed as she forced the device over his mouth. He can't take the oxygen density, Professor Vell said, scanning rapidly. It's oxidizing his alveolar tissue. Internal combustion, he's burning from the inside. I can't regulate it, Kareth gasped. Why does this not kill you? Ramirez's expression didn't soften. It does. Just slower. It's why we age. Why we break. Earth never gives anything for free. She stood and signaled the evac drone. We're cutting the route short. We've seen enough. As they lifted back toward the research station, the jungle fell away beneath them like a closing hand. None of them spoke during ascent. Back inside the sterile safety of the outpost, Kareth lay in recovery. His suit was shredded, but his breathing had stabilized. Professor Vell compiled preliminary reports with shaking fingers. Ziln sat near the viewport, eyes fixed on the dark line of horizon. We thought this was an academic exercise, she whispered. We thought we were studying an anomaly. But this isn't a planet that produced life. It's a crucible. It forges survivors. Ramirez watched from the other side of the room. Her voice was low but clear. Now you understand why we don't invite many guests. Tyrex looked over. Because you're afraid of what they'll see? No, Ramirez said. Because most don't make it home. Outside, the sun dipped low, setting the sky on fire. And inside the alien students, a new awareness began to burn. Quiet, heavy, and impossible to forget. Tyrex spoke, voice soft. And about learning how to carry others. Even when they fall. Ziln added, even when they've already fallen. They didn't sleep that night. Not deeply. Not peacefully. But they understood something they hadn't before. Earth wasn't just a death world. It was a teacher. And every lesson hurt. The emergency sirens sounded at 4:13 Earth Standard Time. Low, vibrating pulses echoed through the outpost's concrete bones. One by one, the alien students emerged from their rooms, bleary-eyed but alert. The station lights flickered, then stabilized, dim red flooding every corridor. Outside the reinforced windows, the sky above Ukraine had changed. It wasn't weather. It was movement. Ramirez met them in the command center, already armored, pulse rifle in hand. Her hair was tied back in a rough knot, eyes scanning displays with practiced urgency. Orbital debris, she said without turning. Classified origin. High-velocity impact in Sector 12. Ground-level event. We picked up the tremor 10 minutes ago. Impact? Kareth asked, stepping forward. Meteor? No. Wrong material signature. Synthetic. And it wasn't falling. It redirected on descent. Tyrex frowned, his translucent armor plates shifting. You're suggesting it was guided. I'm not suggesting anything, Ramirez replied, tapping a sensor feed into life. I'm saying something entered Earth's atmosphere fast and it landed. Now we've got seismic activity, unstable radiation, and every drone we've sent to scout that zone has gone dark. Professor Vell's voice quivered. Could this be a Terran military event? Ramirez looked up. If it were ours, we'd already know. Earth doesn't keep secrets from itself anymore, not ones this big. Ziln leaned toward the viewport. So, who's watching you? Ramirez didn't answer. They geared up quickly. The students hesitated at first, uncertain whether they belonged on the team. But Ramirez didn't argue when they followed. She only handed each of them an emergency injector, her expression solemn. You shouldn't come, she said to Kareth as she sealed her chest plate. You're still recovering. I need to see, he replied. If I want to understand this world, I have to witness what it fights. Outside, the ground transport shuddered to life, cutting across forest and broken highway. The damage near Sector 12 was already visible before they reached the edge. Trees reduced to ash, soil turned glassy beneath scorched shadows. A crater yawned at the center of the devastation, its blackened rim smoking against the dawn sky. Ramirez exited first, weapon at the ready. No sound but the wind. No birdsong. No insects. Just a hollow silence that pressed against the eardrums like altitude. Tyrex deployed his sensor rig. Residual radiation. Exotic particles. This wasn't a conventional craft. Kareth stood at the edge of the crater and stared down. Something moved at the bottom. A metallic shape twitched in the ash. A sphere cracked open like an egg. Surrounding it were streaks of melted stone and something else. Footprints. They weren't human. Ramirez cursed under her breath. "We've got company." A low growl answered her. Not from the crater. From the trees behind them. The first creature emerged slowly as if knowing it didn't need to rush. Then another. Then three more. They were humanoid in structure but not human. Thin, pale skin stretched over elongated limbs. Mandibles clicked beneath two small eyes. They moved like insects wearing bones. "Outworlders," Kareth whispered. "But not from the Accord. These aren't registered species." Ramirez raised her rifle. "Invaders." They struck fast. No words. No warning. Just a blur of teeth and claws. The fight was chaos. Ramirez dropped two with headshots. Tyrex slammed one into a tree, shattering bark and bone. Ziln ducked, rolled, slashed with a salvaged blade, her precision a stark contrast to her usual stillness. Kareth used his neural baton to stun a third, only to be tackled by a fourth. He hit the ground hard. Claws raked across his chest plate. Sparks flew. The air filled with the scent of ozone and blood. The creature opened its jaws to finish him, and Ramirez was there. One shot. Silence. Kareth blinked up at her, breath ragged. "Don't freeze again," she said, helping him up. "Earth doesn't let you freeze." The skirmish ended in minutes. 5 attackers dead. One escaped into the forest, bleeding. "They were scouts," Tyrex said, breathing heavily. "A vanguard. Testing response capability." "They picked the wrong planet," Ramirez replied. But her eyes lingered on the broken pod. And the tracks. There had been more. That night, the students sat around a heat lamp inside the field station. Their injuries had been treated. Their minds less so. "Do you think they knew?" Ziln asked. "About Earth? What it is?" Ramirez shook her head. "Doesn't matter. They'll know now." Kareth leaned forward. "They were faster than us. Stronger. But not smarter. They charged without strategy. Without adapting. And they died," Ziln said softly. "Because they thought they'd already won." Professor Vell entered the room, data pad in hand. "We've intercepted an unauthorized transmission. Faint but deliberate. It's bouncing through the upper atmosphere. Someone's calling for backup." Tyrex stood. "Then this wasn't random." "No," Ramirez said, standing beside him. "It was a test." Silence. Kareth finally spoke, his voice clear and resolved. "Then we answer it. Not with more violence. But with truth." Ramirez looked at him. "What truth?" "That Earth," Kareth said, eyes burning, "is not a prize. It's a warning." The days that followed moved quickly. The university recalled the mission but agreed to broadcast the students' report to every known member of the Accord. A full transmission, uncensored, unedited, raw. Footage of the jungle. Of the radiation zones. Of the crater. Of the fight. Kareth's narration carried the weight of revelation. "In our arrogance, we believed Earth's people were accidental victors, beings shaped by chaos, lucky enough to rise. We were wrong. Earth shaped them not through fortune but through crucible. It is not a home. It is a trial. And those who pass it are tempered beyond reason." He paused. "To come here uninvited is to challenge a world that has buried extinction-level events and kept walking. Earth is not a death world because it kills everything. It is a death world because it does not die." The footage ended with the shot of Ramirez standing before the crater, rifle at her side, looking not at the sky, but at the Earth. Solid. Unmoved. The message went out. And was heard. Weeks later, an official Accord response confirmed the origin of the incursion. An unaligned splinter race seeking to test outer rim worlds for colonization potential. They had underestimated Earth. They wouldn't again. Kareth stood alone on the tarmac the day he left. His body still bore faint scars, but he stood taller now. There was weight to him that hadn't been there before, not physical but earned. Ramirez approached, handing him a sealed case. "What is it?" he asked. "A sample of soil," she said. "From Chernobyl. It shouldn't support life. But it does. Take it with you." He opened the case, looked at the dark, cracked earth inside and nodded once. I will tell them what I saw. You'd better. And if they don't believe me? Ramirez smiled. They'll come see for themselves. The shuttle lifted into the atmosphere, silent but powerful. And Earth remained where it had always been. Waiting.